Thanks, Chris. I am really going to miss that guy. Just when we started getting really close and being good friends, he decided to move. He's been a real blessing in our lives, and just can you guys give Chris a round of applause for all he does? Thanks, Chris. All right, so this is class 10, and this is probably a class a lot of people have been waiting for. We're really going to get specific and talk about some specific areas of food and not be so general anymore. So this is going to be great. I am really going to focus tonight on, you've heard me talk about sugar over and over and over again, so I'll hit that a little bit, but I'm really going to focus on some other things tonight. I'm really going to focus mainly on the grains and understanding what's going on with wheat and the grains, dairy, and soy. I haven't really touched on those in too much detail. So that's what I'm really going to focus on tonight. So let's just dive right into it. Roman numeral 1. The food you are eating should depend on your current state of health. So this is critical to understand because a lot of people say, well, you know, God made this food. It's in its original form. Why shouldn't I be able to eat it? You know, there's a lot of people who can't eat certain foods, even God's foods, because of a compromised state of health. So letter A, paragraph A, it's been made clear in past classes that we really need to focus on eating foods originally created by God. And literally 100% of the time, when you turn away from this processed standard American diet and turn back to God's foods, you will experience better health. However, as in paragraph B, if you're in a general good state of health, you should be able to eat all those foods without problem. And a lot of people are able to eat grains, dairy, corn, healthy sugars, fruit, all of these foods, and it doesn't affect them, but especially if they're eating them in the right forms. But in paragraph C, we see that if you have a compromised health issue, which unfortunately that's really the crux of what's going on right now in this generation, in this time. So we have so many people with compromised health. And if you have a compromised health issue for a certain season, you might not be able to eat even something as healthy as fruit. And that's really hard for a lot of people to understand. But there's a lot of people out there that don't eat fruit. I'm actually one of them. I eat very little fruit, and it's hard because I love fruit. I grew up eating lots of fruit. But I do much better when I don't eat as much fruit. So unfortunately, sometimes for even just a short season, we might have to avoid even some really healthy things to restore health to our bodies because we're so compromised. And I gave just a few brief examples here of situations where you might have to be more selective even with eating really healthy foods. If you have skin conditions. An obvious one is food reactions, food allergies. A lot of people have food sensitivities to tomatoes, to mango, to pineapple, to potatoes. Some common basic foods people are having major reactions and major sensitivities to. And it's not because, you know, sometimes even in their best form, in a compromised system, they're not healthy at that time. It's important to understand. I gave a lot of other examples here. Infectious issues, a big one. People that have viruses, parasites, fungus, candida overgrowth, very common today. And then any of the big ones, you know, like cancer, you've probably heard, sugar feeds cancer. So you have to be really careful even with natural sugars if you have a condition like cancer. And it's really our choices within the last 100 years that have led to this. And unfortunately, children today are being born compromised, more and more so than ever before. Paragraph D, in a compromised body, it's important to choose God's foods wisely. You will want to learn which foods your body will require based on your current needs. Okay, so let's get into grains. This is a big one. Wheat, corn, and other grains. Paragraph A, wheat and other grains have been a staple food for culture throughout history. There's no doubt about it. This is a main food for many cultures all around the world. Now there's cultures who have existed all around the world and been very healthy, and they don't eat grains at all. But there's a lot of cultures where they ate a lot of grains. It depends on where you live. In the Bible, in Ezekiel, we have Ezekiel bread. Also take for yourself wheat, barley, beans, lentils, millet, and spelt. Put them into a vessel and make bread. And this is one of the most confusing topics because people love bread. Love bread. I mean, love bread. You tell people they can't eat bread anymore, and wow, you just started a war. If you think about how much bread we eat, I grew up eating toast in the morning and a sandwich for lunch and rolls for dinner. We eat bread 3 meals a day, and then our snacks in between meals are usually involve bread of some sort, whether it's bagels or crackers or something. So it's a big change for people when bread becomes an issue for them. But let's talk about what's happened to the grains so we can have some understanding about why it's happened and what some better choices are that we can start making. Paragraph B, from a historical perspective, grains have been basically the same. So the first thing we have to understand is that grains, when they were grown in a field, they were harvested, they were cut, and they were laid in the field, and they were actually exposed to the elements. So they would get some moisture, some dew. The sun would be hitting them, and the grains would actually naturally sprout in the field. And these were the grains that we would take out of the field and bring into our kitchen and turn into bread. They were already sprouted for us. And what's happened is, in paragraph C, since the Industrial Revolution and some inventions that have been made, we've found, of course, quicker, cheaper ways of harvesting and milling grain that has saved us time, that has increased production. And now we don't want grains to get wet. We want them as dry as possible so they last the longest. So these kinds of changes have changed the nature of the grains we used to use when we harvested straight out of the field. So combines, for example. You could harvest grain and you could store it in these large storage bins for future use. And then what happened after that, in paragraph D, they decided to start removing the actual properties of the plant that would cause it to spoil. So the germ, the bran, the vitamins, the minerals, you remove all that stuff from the grain and it won't spoil. So this is the invention of processed foods. They didn't know it at the time. They didn't realize what they were doing at the time. They thought they were doing something that was better or that was more convenient. And it's really interesting if you look at paragraph D, that when they first started milling these grains and removing the germ and the bran, they would sift it over and over and over again, and they turned it into this white flour, and it was only available to the rich. This was like rich people's food. And the rich would pay big money for this, and the poor people really, really wanted it, but they didn't even have access to it, which was too bad because they would have been much healthier, of course. But it was only available to the elite. They thought that this white flour was food for the elite. And what's really funny is they took the bran and the germ that they removed and they fed it to the animals. So all the healthy part, all the nutrition they gave to the animals, and they were just eating the white processed flour. And real quick, just to give you a history, because I think it's fascinating, this is kind of the beginning of the processed food industry and what I call the shelf life business. And that really, really got going in the early 1900s. So we had Industrial Revolution. We had a lot of these machines. We thought we were doing things a better way. Found ways to store things longer so that they wouldn't spoil. And one of the instrumental things that happened is we had to create food that could last for a long time for our soldiers, like in World War I. Food that wouldn't spoil. So if they were out in the jungle somewhere, they could be there for 3, 5, 6 months and have rations with them, and they would never spoil. the only way to do that is to actually remove the nutrients from the food. And then the food companies got a hold of this, and they thought, great idea. No spoilage, better profit margins, things can stay on the shelf longer, and then we have what? We have grocery stores. Suddenly food started coming from the grocery stores. So that's kind of where this all started. And one of the big ones in that is the grains, the way our grains have been processed. So what has happened, we've removed all the nutrition, we've removed the natural sprouting process that's happened, and because the companies know that this is a kind of a lifeless, dead food, what used to be a living food is now kind of a lifeless, dead food, they started fortifying things, paragraph E. And this is where marketing really comes into play. I mean, you still hear it today, fortified with vitamin D, fortified with more of this, with more of that. When you remove all the nutrition from the plant, you don't take a synthetic vitamin or mineral, stick it back into it, and expect it to do something for our health. It just doesn't work, and it just doesn't make sense. But that's what they're doing. So you know you have a food that's completely void of nutrition if it's been fortified. And that's what they're doing with bread, that's what they're doing with milk, that's what they're doing with cereal. I mean, there's not one shred of nutritional benefit to most cereals. And they fortify it to make you think that it has something in it that's good for you. So we really have to understand that. The bottom line is the body understands whole foods. You don't take God's original design, strip it of everything in the way he created it, add synthetic stuff back in, and expect the body to understand it. The body doesn't understand that. The body understands whole foods. Paragraph F, hybridization. So this is a whole other area that has really altered the face of grains. Hybridization is different from genetic modification. Hybridization is actually taking different wheat plants and combining them to achieve a specific result. And the different results they're looking for is resistance to insects and other pests so that they would stand up straighter and taller, have a higher protein content, a higher gluten content, tolerate poor soil and water conditions, and even thrive off of chemical fertilizers. So as they kept hybridizing the different types of wheat together, they'd find varieties that were more resistant to chemicals, that were more resistant to bugs, that were higher in gluten. Why is high gluten content important in a grain? Important, I should say, for the food manufacturers, not us. Because gluten is a natural insecticide. It keeps bugs away from the plant. So if they can hybridize the wheat together so that it has as much gluten as possible, it'll be very resistant to insects, and the farmers will have a better crop, and the food companies will have better profit. So we've turned wheat, barley, rye, oats, these grains, into what I call the food-like substances. We've hybridized it, we've stripped all the nutrition out of it, and we don't sprout it anymore. So that's the problem with wheat and grains today. And it's all been done for one reason, paragraph G, the food industry. So if we were still growing wheat in our fields and using that, we'd be doing it the way it's always been done. But we're not. We're relying on the food industry for our food because we don't rely on ourselves for our food anymore. So it's the food industry that is going to do what's best for them, what's best for their bottom line, what's best for their profit margin. It's never going to be what's best for the health of us. It's going to be what's best for them. And the processed white flour, when it's heavily refined, becomes a very addictive substance, just like we talked about last week. Anything in a super concentrated amount can be addictive, and white flour can fit that bill. I mean, that might sound kind of funny because we think how addictive sugar is, but again, try to take someone's bread away from them on a consistent basis. It's something that people crave. Paragraph H, real quick on gluten. So gluten is a protein molecule, and it's very hard for people to digest it. Now, if the grain is soaked or the grain is sprouted, it's much easier for the body to process that gluten. Also, if it wasn't hybridized and didn't have such a high gluten content, it would be much easier for the body to handle. But what's happened is, again, all these things are being done to the grain. We have compromised systems because we've had 3 generations of processed food now. Our children are being born with eczema, allergy, asthma, psoriasis, ADD, ADHD, autism, which has never happened before. And so now gluten is a big, big, big problem. Big. And it is the #1 food sensitivity in the country, is gluten. I gave you the highest gluten containing, just remember eyebrow, barley, rye, oats, and wheat. Those are the highest gluten containing grains. Now you can find gluten-free oats, and we'll talk more about that, but at the end here in this section. But those are the big 4 that contain high amounts of gluten. Now, it's hard because almost all the grains contain gluten. Spelt contains gluten. Bulgur, some of these other types of wheat all contain gluten, but smaller amounts. So it comes down to how compromised is your system. What forms are you eating the grain in? Is it a whole grain sprouted form? If not, anybody can have a problem with it. But if you're eating the right form, you're only going to have a problem with it if you have a compromised system, you're gluten intolerant, celiac, you have some of those other types of issues. Paragraph I. So this is the gastrointestinal epidemic. I mean, we're talking pain, celiac, Crohn's, colitis, diverticulitis, IBS, people just constantly struggling with gas, bloating. You want to read a really good book, read a book called Wheat Belly. Talks about how people have such horrible gas and bloating and big midsections because they can't process wheat. Beer. Sorry, guys, if you drink beer, or girls. But beer is a big issue. The beer belly, that's not like a joke. I mean, that's a real thing. You don't just say beer belly. That drinking beer really causes that belly. And one of the reasons is because it's wheat and it's gluten and it's not good quality wheat. So I want to touch real quick on what's happening with the wheat and the grains and the gluten and how it's affecting our system. And it's something, you might have heard this term before, but it's called leaky gut. It's basically our compromised digestive tracts. So from years of processed foods, years of eating the wrong foods now, a good 3-4 decades, the birth control pills, the antibiotics, the steroids, the NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, the aspirin, the Motrin, the Advil, all of these things that destroy the stomach lining, antacids destroy the stomach lining, we just go on and on. All of these seemingly safe over-the-counter drugs that we use for all different types of issues really have a lot of negative effects on the body. We're starting to feel the repercussions of that now, but it destroys the gut lining. And when your gut lining is destroyed, things can leak into your bloodstream that were never supposed to be there. The body's supposed to be the intestinal tract's supposed to be a closed loop from your mouth and out. Nothing should be getting into your bloodstream except for nutrients. And now that's not happening anymore. Everything we're eating is spilling out into our bloodstream. So if gluten is very hard for the body to process, the gluten leaks out into the bloodstream, and it's not supposed to be there. It's a foreign invader to the bloodstream. It's an enemy. The body creates antibodies, and it starts to attack it. And the body starts to attack itself. It starts to get confused. This is where autoimmune conditions come from. So grains is a big one for a lot of autoimmune conditions. Celiac, for example, Hashimoto's. It's implicated in Hashimoto's disease of the thyroid. So the gluten is in the bloodstream. The body's attacking it. And there's molecules that are similar to the gluten molecule in our own glands and organs. The body starts attacking them. And that's what autoimmune disease is. So you don't treat autoimmune disease by suppressing the immune system, which is what happens with a lot of people with autoimmune diseases, is you take out the food or the thing that's offending the body and causing it to attack itself. It's very important. Gluten is one of the big ones where that's happening. So I really encourage, if you're quote unquote gluten sensitive or not, to highly just really stress the fact that this is one of the biggest intolerances in our food supply today. And if you're going to eat it, eat a good whole food form of it. And we'll talk about which ones are the best. First, paragraph K, which ones should we avoid? It's going to be your processed foods, using especially these heavy gluten-containing grains. This is going to be your packaged food. It's in everything. White bread, wheat bread, whole wheat bread. So if I gave you a scale of 1 to 10, and white bread was a 1, whole wheat bread would be like a 3. And that's very hard for people to believe. Whole wheat is still what? Processed, refined, full of gluten. It still has all the problems that the white bread has. It's still processed by a large food company. It's a little better, but read the ingredients. You still have about 17 ingredients in it. The second one's probably high fructose corn syrup. But you think you're healthy because you're eating whole wheat bread. And it's marketing, it's deception, it's deceptive marketing. I actually went to the store last week and I got a box of saltine crackers, and they had whole wheat saltine crackers. And the difference in the ingredients in those two boxes is the whole wheat saltine crackers had caramel coloring in it to make it look brown. So you really need to understand that the food companies aren't looking out for us. We have to have knowledge and understanding of what we're putting in our bodies. And don't assume just because it says whole wheat, it's healthy. You really want to be eating sprouted grain breads. Whole wheat's a step up. It's a step in the right direction. But it's still far from the way we used to eat grains and the way we used to eat bread. Very important to understand. So baked goods with processed flours, cupcakes, donuts, brownies, cookies, cakes, pies, pasta, pretzels, pizza. It's like all of our snack foods. It's the staples of the American diet. And we wonder why we're having so many problems with our health today. Everything we eat is this processed wheat, these processed grains. So what do we get back to? What are better options? I give you a lot of them here. The ancient seed grains. I'm a big fan of these. These contain no gluten. They have not yet been controlled by the large food companies. They haven't been hybridized. They haven't been genetically modified. They haven't been grown in super mass quantities. Millet, amaranth, buckwheat, quinoa, wild rice, long grain brown rice, even jasmine rice, any kind of rice in its whole natural form. I mentioned oats. Even though oats are a gluten-containing grain, what's different about oats is you find oats oftentimes in its whole unprocessed form, like the steel-cut oats. They're unprocessed. And if you're not gluten intolerant, you'll be fine with oats. But it's the wheat that's in process and that's in everything more so than the oats. So the oats are a good choice for a lot of people. Sprouted grains. So we have sprouted Ezekiel bread. We have Genesis 1:29 bread. There's other. You're going to find them in the refrigerated section of the store. Why? Because they're not going to have a shelf life of 6 months. They're sprouted. They're going to spoil. That's okay. That's what God's naturally created foods do. They spoil eventually. It's nothing to be scared of. Nut flours, almond flour, coconut flour. You can use other nut flours, or you can actually buy whole grains. Hopefully find heirloom varieties of these seeds, buy them yourself, sprout them, and make your own bread. Paragraph M, I think it's important to note that you have to be careful. Just say, okay, I'm going to be healthier. I'm going to avoid gluten. I'm going to eat all gluten-free. You go to the gluten-free section, and you're eating every other kind of processed, starchy, potato starch, soy, rice-based carbohydrate there is. But people don't know that. So be careful just eating in the gluten-free section. You can still eat every kind of cupcake and brownie and thing imaginable. It's just using a different type of starch. Paragraph N, I just want to briefly touch on corn, but 85% of corn is genetically modified unless it's clearly stated non-GMO on the label. I don't know if it passed, but they were trying to genetically modify sweet corn. That was one of the things that was still untouched, and they were trying to genetically modify that. I don't know if that happened or not. But when you eat corn, you really want to eat organic, non-GMO sweet corn. Corn off the cob, popcorn off the cob. There's actually a gentleman at the farmer's market that has really amazing produce, and he has the little tiny corn kernels that's the corn, like the popcorn, and you literally twist it right off of the corn cob and make popcorn. That's fun. I mean, how much more fun would that be for your kids to make popcorn that way? So we can get yeah, it's fun for us, exactly. So we can get these things. So corn is also in everything, just like the wheat. It's in everything. It's a large-scale, mass-produced crop. So go for the non-GMO, the organic stuff, the blue corn chips that are organic and non-GMO, the tortillas, same thing. Let's go on to sugar. I just want to touch on this briefly because I really want to focus on the other items. But I've stressed over and over how dangerous sugar is, so I'm not going to do that again. I will say in paragraph B, it is the number one thing we can eat that will put us on the fast track to disease. There's just no denying that anymore. It's even mainstream news now. There are multiple documentaries now that show the dangers of sugars. Multiple medical doctors are now speaking out. It was on 60 Minutes last week. So that tells you that it's mainstream. Paragraph C, I just want to touch on the fact that these blood sugar roller coasters that are going on are really affecting our children. I really think it's important to rethink breakfast. Breakfast, starting the day with sugary cereals and Pop-Tarts and pancakes and syrup and orange juice and every kind of sugar and starch, is really throwing their blood sugars off, and it's causing a lot of these hyperactivity disorders. And it's really sad because we don't link it to the food. Instead, we think there's a problem with the child, and we give them pharmaceutical drugs. So we really need to look at the importance of food in that area. It's estimated that the average American, paragraph E, consumes 150 pounds of sugar per year. In the year 1900, it was about 15 pounds. Now it's 150 pounds of sugar per year. Can you imagine if I had a wheelbarrow full of 150 pounds of sugar and dumped it out right here? And that's the average. So if some people aren't eating sugar, like I don't know exactly what I eat, but I'm probably more in the 15-gram area. That means somebody else is eating like 300. I know that's crazy to think. Paragraph F. So the main sugars we should avoid: candy. Candy used to be made with fruit and honey. Now everything's processed. High fructose corn syrup and pure straight sugar. Sugared beverages, soda. Soda, the number one source of calories in the American diet, soda pop. The most dangerous thing you can put in your body. Store-bought fruit juices, vitamin water, energy drinks, they all contain lots of sugar. Baked goods, condiments high in sugar. So it's the hidden sugar people don't see. I talked about last time, it's a very addictive substance. So the food companies are very quick to put sugar in everything because they know you're going to buy it over and over and over and over and over. So that's why your ketchup and your salad dressings and your mayonnaise and everything has lots of sugar in it because, well, you like it and your kids like it and you're going to keep buying it. High fructose corn syrup. Read food labels, look for OS. OS means sugar. Dextrose, maltose, fructose. OS is sugar. Avoid all artificial sweeteners as well. I just wanted to show you a couple examples real quick this is the amount of sugar that's in a bottle of Pepsi. So this is, there's about 2.5 servings. I can't see the sugar content. 28 grams of sugar, so 56. So there's about 80 grams of sugar in one bottle. And there's 4 grams is a teaspoon. This one I think is interesting because this is vitamin water. This is supposed to be water and vitamins. A lot of people drink this. There's a lot of sugar in water. Oh, yeah, especially on this one. This is a small bottle of Heinz tomato ketchup. The sugar goes up to here. So condiments. We wonder why we love ketchup so much. I don't think it's our addiction to tomatoes. And this is 100% raw juice. The sugar's up to here. And it's just because it's straight fruit juice. So there's just a high sugar content. And this is how God made sugar, into a stick. Try getting that much sugar out of one of these. So this is sugar cane. So I just think that's cool. So what are better options when it comes to sugar? Natural whole fruits, of course. I gave just a brief list of your lowest sugar fruits. If you're really trying to avoid sugar and be really careful with your sugar, these are the main fruits I stick to. Lemons, limes, avocado, grapefruit, unsweetened cranberries. The high sugar fruits are going to be your bananas, dates, figs, raisins, mango, pineapple. Raw, unpressed, unheated honey, pure maple syrup, pure agave syrup, I put in extreme moderation, palm sugar, coconut nectar, lakanto, and stevia. Stevia is not even sugar. It's not an ose. There's no ose in stevia. It's a plant that God was very gracious in giving us a plant that was 200 times sweeter than sugar. So praise God for that, right? You just have to learn to like it. In the beginning, a lot of people don't care for it. I see a lot of people shaking their head. Yeah, but it really grows on you. I really like stevia now. And if you grow it in your garden and just eat the leaves, it tastes amazing. Paragraph H, what is the best option? The best option is to really focus just on the fruits, the honey, lakanto, stevia, and occasional maple syrup. Above that, I gave better options, but people just tend to overdo it. We have to understand that agave, palm sugar, raw cane sugar, coconut nectar are still highly concentrated sugars, not the way God designed them, still highly concentrated for us to satisfy our sweet tooth. If you're diabetic or you have infections or you have cancer, you have major digestive issues, you really want to stick to stevia and only the low sugar fruits and really minimize eating too much, even natural fruit sugars. And the climax of this is paragraph I. And this is what I did, and this is what a lot of people do, and it's understandable, it's human nature, is we trade one addiction for another. We give up the processed white sugar, and we're still eating brownies and cookies every day loaded with tons of agave and raw cane sugar. We've traded one addiction for another. I just really encourage people, if they know it's a problem, to break free of the addiction. Don't just try to trade up on our addictions. So let's really get into dairy. Roman numeral 3. The Bible talks about a land flowing with milk and honey. Certainly, as with grains, milk and related products such as cheese, yogurt, kefir, cream, and butter have been staple foods throughout history. No doubt about it. Dairy, unfortunately, I think, has probably been altered more than any other food. What are cows, paragraph C, what are cows and goats supposed to be eating? Well, we know what they're supposed to be eating. They're supposed to be eating grass. Very few cows and goats and other animals eat grass anymore. It's really sad. What natural environment are they most comfortable or are they most healthy? Because of the high demand of dairy products and the interest of big business to create more products and more profit, the original design is rarely seen anymore. So you see cows grazing in the field, but the majority of the stuff in the grocery store shelf does not come from a cow grazing happily in the field. So I'm going to give you this, and might be a little bit disturbing if some of you aren't aware of this, but I think it's important, so I just want to go through it real quick. So if you love animals, you're not going to like this part. Paragraph D, the life of a dairy cow. An animal can only give milk after it's given birth. Okay, cows don't just naturally give milk their whole lives. They have to actually give birth to a calf. That calf is taken from its mother within the first 2 days of its life. It's the craziest cry you've ever heard. And they do it over and over year after year. Male calves are worthless to the dairy industry, so they're either shot and killed, or they're sent to veal farms where they don't see daylight, they're constricted and changed, and they're not fed so that they don't grow. And they're killed while they're still an infant. Dairy cows are shot with growth hormones so that they can produce 7,000 liters of milk a year, which is 10 times the normal amount they'd ever need to feed one of their offspring. Because of the heavy production, their teats usually get mastitis, very painful pus and swelling, and they have to give the cows antibiotics. Because the udders are so oversized and constantly producing milk, and it weighs so heavily on the cows, a lot of them have all kinds of limb disorders. They break their limbs. They can hardly walk. The average dairy cow lives 4 to 7 years. The average life expectancy of a cow is 21. And they're fed grains, corn, and antibiotics, and they don't get to eat grass. And they have to continually artificially inseminate them so that they're always pregnant, so that they're always giving milk. So paragraph E, not only is consuming dairy off the grocery store shelf cruelty to animals, it's an excuse to create a dirty, disgusting product. And the way they get away with it is they pasteurize it. They heat it. It has so many antibiotics, so many viruses, so much pus, so much disgusting stuff in that milk, but they can sell it because they pasteurize it. It's an excuse to create a dirty product. And if you've ever been to a dairy farm, you know how true that is. Then you add on top of the fact that they homogenize it, which is another way to alter the original structure of it. And you have a food that is very unfit for human consumption. Paragraph F, processed dairy contains lactose. So a lot of people are lactose intolerant, right? That's a sugar. And casein, which is a protein. These things are very hard for people to digest. And just like I talked about with wheat, if you have a damaged gut lining, these things are leaking into the bloodstream and they're wreaking havoc on our system. Milk allergies are very common. Paragraph G, children. This is huge, huge, huge. When I am working, or I have a parent come to see me for their child, and they're having allergies, eczema, psoriasis, autism, expressing psychotic type of behavior, so many things, the first thing I do is I make sure that they're off dairy. Because 4 times out of 5, getting them off dairy will fix the behavioral problem, the allergy problem, the eczema problem, the psoriasis problem. Dairy. Because it's not meant to be consumed by human children in this form, especially. And it's linked to SIDS, children actually suffocating in their sleep because they can't process cow's milk. Colic, eczema, allergies, type 1 juvenile diabetes. There's a lot of links on the government websites about the link to type 1 juvenile diabetes because of the virus is transferred through processed milk. And breastfeeding mothers need to understand this as well. That, if they're drinking processed milk, that is being passed on to their child as well. It's really weakening the immune system of children. Paragraph H, if consumed raw, however, it's tolerable and much better digested. Why? Because in its raw form, it has lactase enzymes that digest lactose. Just like mother's breast milk is rich in enzymes and rich in healthy fats, so is raw milk. So even people that are lactose intolerant can often do fine with raw milk because it has the natural enzymes still in it. It's still a living food. It hasn't been processed. So it's a much better choice. And if you're going to feed your children any kind of an animal milk, I highly encourage it to be raw, and I encourage it to be goat's milk because goat's milk is much more molecularly similar to human breast milk than cow's milk. And I'm not saying you can't consume raw cow's milk, but we have to understand that God created a cow to create milk for his offspring, just like humans' milk is designed for human offspring. So it doesn't mean we can't use it as food, but goat's milk is going to be much similar, and if you're going to do it, you better do it in its raw, unprocessed form, or you're going to see how damaging it can be to children. It's one of the most damaging, things that happens with our children today. Either they're not breastfed at all, or they're immediately put on processed dairy, causing all kinds of immune system problems. So paragraph I, the beauty of fermentation. So when you ferment, there's enzymes, there's bacteria that digest the casein, that digest the lactose, all the things that cause the problems in the dairy disappear. It makes it easier to digest the bacteria, and it actually heals the gut. Fermented foods and fermented dairy is one of the best foods for healing the gut. It's the answer for if you're constipated or if you have diarrhea, it fixes both. It's awesome. A good quality raw yogurt or kefir works on both of those issues. Commercial, paragraph J, commercial fermentation, however, you want to be careful with because they either don't ferment it long enough because they're cranking out tens of thousands of gallons of yogurt or whatever they're making. So they don't ferment it long enough, and oftentimes they actually pasteurize it after it's been fermented, which that kind of defeats the purpose. So I encourage people to call companies and find out how they process their product. We can get it from local farmers. So we need more resources in that area. So paragraph K, what dairy should we avoid? The homogenized, pasteurized stuff, which is going to be most of the stuff in the grocery store. Watch the cheese consumption. Cheese is hidden in a lot of products. American cheese, just so you guys know, it's not real. That's not a real thing. I mean, I grew up eating grilled cheese sandwiches with American cheese. I'd have been much better off eating, cheddar cheese or because it's just not real. Look at the ingredients sometime. Cheese substitutes. They're often full of chemicals and soy products. Better options, paragraph L. Butter and ghee. Ghee is clarified butter. Butter is very healthy and easy to digest. Why? Butter has very, very minimal amounts of lactose in it. So I have not even yet met a person who had a problem digesting butter. Butter is fine for most people, even who have severe dairy intolerances. It has lots of healthy fats. It's high in vitamin A and D. And we can also get raw dairy products from local farmers. Farmers market season. Overland Park Farmers Market opens next weekend. Olathe in a couple weeks. Overland Park, it's my favorite one, downtown Overland Park. But make some connections there because there are farmers where you can get raw yogurt, raw cheese, raw milk, and we need to start consuming those products. And you can make your own. You can make yogurt, you can make kefir, you can make water kefir, coconut kefir, you can get kefir grains, you can make your own yogurt. And then the milk alternatives. I think about when I stopped consuming dairy, most people, they actually did a survey, it's really interesting. What do you think the hardest thing for the American to give up? You think it'd be like candy or cookies or something? It was cheese. Cheese, the hardest thing for Americans to give up, right? And cheese was a hard one. It was a hard one for me too, but milk wasn't that hard. I think about why do we drink milk? We really only drink milk because we eat cereal. So if we understand the grain thing going on and the dairy issue going on, we can probably get away from the milk pretty easily. But if you want better choices, I still use it because when I make buckwheat cereal and some other things that I do, I'll use some of these alternatives. So it's your coconut milk, your rice milk, your hemp milk, your almond milk, your hazelnut milk, your oat milk. You can make chia seed milk. You can make milk out of anything. You can make macadamia nut milk if you want to. You can make it. Just make it. It's good. I said that for you, Jen. Paragraph M, the calcium myth. The highest rates of osteoporosis in the world all come from the nations with the highest dairy consumption. Processed dairy is very acid forming. When you put acidic foods in your body has to balance that with alkaline minerals. The most available alkaline mineral in your body is calcium. The most abundant source is in your bones. So soda drinking and milk and cheese eating and processed food eating is causing osteoporosis. If dairy really was our answer to osteoporosis, then why do we have an epidemic of osteoporosis? Every one of us grew up eating cheese and drinking milk, and we have an epidemic of osteoporosis. Something's wrong. It's marketing. It's milk mustaches and school lunch programs. American Dairy Association is a very, very, very big business. And I encourage you to explore. I gave you a couple really, really good websites. The first one is notmilk.com. That website will blow you away. There's so much information in there. And Weston A. Price Foundation, westonaprice.org. I've mentioned him in classes before. He was a dentist. He traveled the world to figure out why people in America had such poor teeth health. And he said it's not because they're not brushing enough, it's because of their diet. And he's real big on raw milk and understanding healthy nutrition. Got a lot of good information on his website. All right, let's hit soy. Paragraph 4, soy. This is a big one. Let's just start in paragraph A. And this is one of the most fascinating ones because sugars come out, it's dangerous. You know, it might be hard to stay away from, but we know it's bad at least. And a lot of information is coming out about the dangers of a lot of these processed foods. But for some reason, soy has kind of eluded the public. And they actually did a survey and say about 85% of people still think soy is a health food. But if you look at natural health practitioners, myself, pretty much any chiropractor I know, if you look at Body Ecology program, the GAPS program, David Wolf, any of these natural health practitioners, Donna Gates, all these people out here, they will all, overwhelming consensus, avoid soy, avoid soy, avoid soy. Because we've all studied it extensively. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the birth of soy as a health food product. Large companies such as ADM Milling began planting large fields of soy to be used as a cheap oil for industry. I put a little clip in here from Wikipedia. In the 1930s, Ford spent over $1 million researching soy because they could use it for paint, shock absorbers, even make it into plastic. So companies started growing tens of thousands of acres of soy to use the oil. So what's left over when you separate out the oil, you have protein, soy protein isolate. They fed it to animals. They were going to just use it as feed for the animals. The animals all got sick and were infertile from being fed the soy. So what happened was, unfortunately, they still wanted to sell it because a company doesn't want to lose profit. And they originally, again, just grew the soy to get the oil. But they had this soy protein isolate left over. So they decided to sell it to the general public. And the main form you're going to find it in is the soy protein isolate, this isolate form. It's very heavily processed. It's the same kind of thing that happened with whey. You got whey protein isolate. It's a byproduct of the dairy industry. It used to just fall on the floor, so they'd sweep it up into garbage cans, haul it away until they realized they could sell it to us as a protein supplement. Paragraph C, the USDA said soy may reduce the risk of heart disease, and the American Heart Association also jumped on board and talked about all the heart-healthy benefits of soy. So now they had a market, not just for the oil, because the industry was using the oil. They had a market to the general public for the soy protein isolate. One of the arguments that's made about soy is, well, they eat it in Asia. They've been eating it over there for thousands of years, and they eat tons and tons of soy. Not true. Is there anybody here from Asia that can back me up on that? One? Do you guys eat lots of soy there? You guys do? Okay, so this is traditionally what they've eaten in Japan and in Asia. About 65% of the Japanese diet is fish and rice, and the remainder of it is vegetables. And soy is about 1%. Now, they'll do a little bit of soy with every meal, but they usually use it as a condiment, and it's fermented. So if you've heard of miso, tempeh, natto, okay, these are all fermented forms of soy. And it would ferment for 6 months up to 3 years sometimes. And they would use it just a little bit with each meal. So they did not just consume soy raw. Okay, no culture has ever just consumed tons and tons of raw soybeans. Paragraph E, the way protein isolate is consumed and the way it's processed, they actually remove the fiber. So they separated out the oil, they remove the fiber, they put it into large holding tanks, they wash it in acid, and it's basically a tasteless powder, but it's very cheap. And it's one of those things, again, you can put in almost anything. So it's in 60% of our food supply now. It's another one of those things you just got to look because it's in everything. Paragraph F, 90% of it's genetically modified. 90% of soy is genetically modified. Paragraph G, I will let you go over this in detail on your own, but I encourage you to research this. Research all of the studies that have been done on soy. I have a huge library of information on my computer. I have more articles about the dangers of soy than anything else. I have more articles about soy than I have about aspartame. There is just a lot of research that has been done on soy. A couple of the big ones are the estrogenic properties. This is where it's a little confusing. It's like if a girl has acne, she can take birth control and it can make her acne go away. It's not a good way to balance your hormones. It's a synthetic estrogen. Soy would kind of do the same thing for menopausal women. It would help alleviate the symptoms of menopause because it has an estrogenic effect. Does that make sense to give that to an infant? Of course not. But that's what we're doing. We're claiming it's a health food. It's a goitrogen, so it blocks thyroid function and causes endocrine system imbalance. And it has high levels of phytic acid, which actually pull a lot of minerals out of the body. And there's all kinds of other things you can read there too. Weston A. Price, again, I referred you back to that website. He has a whole section just on soy. It's called Soy Alert. But there's tons of information on the internet about that. If you want to research the health benefits of soy, I encourage you to look at who's behind the study, because the studies are usually funded by the people trying to sell the soy. Paragraph I, Great Plains Laboratory found that almost every single autistic child had high allergies to soy. Paragraph K, the question I really encourage people to ask themselves is, why do I need to consume soy? If it's controversial, and believe me, I know people that have eaten lots of soy of their lives and seen how it's affected them. If it's controversial and there's all this negative press about it, the question that I would just ask myself is, do I need this in my diet? Are there other things that I can consume? Why do I think I need to consume this? Paragraph L, again, fermentation. So fermentation takes out a lot of these negative aspects of soy. So again, natto, tempeh, miso. I am so concerned about soy that I even avoid the fermented stuff. So that's just my personal conviction, but I just encourage you guys to research that on your own. Finally, in paragraph M, many companies, they want to sell soy. Why do people want to sell soy? Why do companies want to sell soy? It's cheap, it's available, it's everywhere. You can sell it to people and make lots of money, just like you can with corn and wheat and these other products. So they want to find a reason to sell it. So they'll say, yeah, I know soy is dangerous and has estrogenic compounds and it causes all these problems, but the problem's in this one extract called isoflavone, so we're going to remove the isoflavones on it and now it's healthy. So it's already processed, the oil's been taken out, the fiber's been taken out, now you've taken the isoflavones out and now it's a health food. I mean, that's what they're trying to claim. So it's like they're just trying to find anything and everything they can do to still sell a product that is very controversial. And the bottom line is that, just like we've talked about the whole time, the body understands whole foods, not isolates. Proteins in its whole food form, sprouted grains, sprouted rice, spirulina, high protein content foods in its original raw form. You don't need to be eating processed isolates. Finally, in Roman numeral 5, it's following the money trail. It's that way with all of these foods. And I didn't have, obviously, on soy, what to eat and what to avoid, because, you know, I personally think it's important to just avoid soy. And there really aren't alternatives. You don't need alternatives because you just don't need it in your diet. I mean, there's plenty. We're not protein deficient. There's plenty of foods that we're eating where we're getting plenty of protein, even if you're vegetarian. So, again, ask yourself why you think you need it. Paragraph A, you will find that each of these foods listed here is a little bit confusing because in their original form, they were created by God. Unfortunately, they've been altered in such a drastic way, they have become unfit for human consumption. We need to get back to God's original design. So if you look behind each of those foods, the grain, sugar, dairy, corn, and soy, we have a common theme. It's big business. These are mass-produced products by big business. It's fairly safe to say that if it's been mass-produced, used by industry, and it's found in almost everything, we should be cautious. I mean, if you went to the grocery store and looked at food labels, how many packaged foods would you find that didn't have wheat, corn, or soy? I mean, maybe 1% of them. Unless you're maybe at Whole Foods, you'd find a lot more. But a traditional grocery store, these things are in everything. It's because they're products of industry. They're cheap. So soy, Cargill is one of the huge sellers and promoters. Cargill is one of the giant grain companies. It kind of has a big stranglehold on our food supply. Nestle Carnation travels to third world countries, tells women that breastfeeding is not a good idea, and instead to start using soy. And they've had traumatic results from that. You know, just a couple decades ago here in America, it was not promoted to breastfeed. There were better ways to do it. Consume our product, consume our infant formula instead of breastfeeding. That happened throughout the 70s. Wheat, corn, and grains. Here's the thing with wheat. It's readily available, as we've talked about, but it's binding like glue. So you can put it in any kind of baking good, baked good, cracker, pretzel, and it binds. It's a binder. I mean, it does the same thing in our bodies. You know, I always give the example of what did you use to make glue when you were in grade school? It was white flour and water. So it's binding, and that makes it attractive to put in everything, because it's going to hold things together, and it costs them nothing. Corn, exclusively controlled by Monsanto, almost completely genetically modified, 85% again. And the high fructose corn syrup and the other sweeteners are huge contributors to increase of disease in modern society. Dairy, just understand, it's one of the largest businesses in America, the American Dairy Association. We've bombarded with the commercials, the milk it does a body good slogan. We really have this mindset that if we don't consume milk, there's no possible way we can be healthy. There's no possible way we could raise a healthy child without consuming milk. I mean, that's how ingrained it is in our culture, where it's almost fear-based, like if we don't consume milk, we're not going to be healthy. Paragraph C, we cannot afford to trust our health and the health of future generations to huge multinational corporations whose focus is profit, not health. We have to start being in control of our food supply. We've relied on a greedy system for one of the most important aspects of human life, food. We're now seeing the repercussions of this. And we can change our bodies. We can change our health. Our children today are being born compromised, but we can change that. We just have to get back to what God originally designed for us. And I think these 5 areas is a huge, huge way we can start to do that, because these are the big guys that are in our processed food supply that we either need to replace with something better, or we need to go back to making it the way God designed it. We'll see huge changes in our health. So I gave you at the end here 5 action steps just to consider. Paragraph D. Number 1 is rethinking breakfast. I mean, think about what we eat for breakfast, or traditionally we've eaten for breakfast. I mean, Eggo waffles and Pop-Tarts and sugared cereal. I mean, my favorites were Count Chocula, Fruity Pebbles, Cocoa Pebbles, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, Fruit Loops. I mean, I ate them all. And children today are still eating that, and it is giving them, you have no idea how huge of a disadvantage that you give your children by feeding them sugar cereals. Mentally, physically, the behavioral issues, by feeding children the sugars and starches for breakfast. We really need to rethink it. This isn't traditionally what people have eaten for breakfast over the course of history. It's what we've eaten in a processed, marketed, heavily advertised world just within the last 100 years. So instead of all the sugar and the muffins and all that, healthy proteins, omelets, vegetables. Don't be afraid to make soup. I mean, you don't have to eat what you hear as a traditional quote-unquote breakfast food. You can eat whatever you want for breakfast. It's okay. There's no rules. I like buckwheat and quinoa porridge a lot. Very, very, very good. Number 2, switch from traditional store-bought milk to alternatives such as coconut milk, almond milk, rice milk. Or I should have put in there to encourage you to try some raw milk. If you've never tried raw goat's milk, I really like it. Some people have tried raw goat's milk and they didn't like it. Maybe it's because of what the goats were eating. I don't know. But the goat's milk I've had, it has tasted really good. Number 3, switch from white bread or wheat bread to whole grain sprouted bread. So the Ezekiel breads, they even have, I think this is accurate, but I even think that they have tortillas, and I think you can get other things besides just the sliced bread in the sprouted form. So look into those. And lettuce wraps. Lettuce wraps are really good. I go to that Mongolian barbecue once in a while, and instead of getting the tortillas, we get the lettuce wraps, and they're really good. Number 4, avoid the protein isolates, very heavily processed, the soy and the whey. Those are the big ones. And they're byproducts of a food that's created for industry. And it used to just be thrown away, and now it's being marketed to us as a health food. So we need to make better choices in this area. There's all kinds of sources of protein. Spirulina, chlorella, your algae are upwards of 70% protein. Sprouted brown rice is super high in protein. Obviously, if you eat meat, even if you just eat one, which I recommend to people oftentimes, a handful of good quality meat a day, you're not protein deficient. I find it really hard-pressed to find somebody who's protein deficient in America. If they're protein deficient, it's because they have compromised health. It's because their digestive systems aren't working. They're not processing things properly. That's why we're protein deficient, not because we don't eat enough protein. Number 5, find replacements for the things you enjoy. This is what's going to make it fun, is still eating pancakes. I like pancakes. I have a pancake recipe that's on my website because I like pancakes, and I don't use the traditional processed wheat flour anymore. And they taste really good. You can make pasta. You can use zucchini for pasta. We have a spiralizer that you can make. It makes like little angel hair looking pasta. It tastes phenomenal over meatballs and marinara sauce. You can use quinoa instead of pasta. Breads, you can use nut flours, almond flour for bread, or you can start making, getting the whole grains yourself and sprouting them yourself. There's all kinds of resources out there for us. So I highly encourage you to just look at some of those options, and those are just some things you can start doing right away. That's it. Amen.
First question.
I just wanted to say I asked you a question about protein and like meat and meats coinciding with weightlifting like about 4 weeks ago, and I took your suggestion on just like getting it in vegetables and stuff like that, and really minimized my meat consumption, and I'm getting way stronger. So
nice. Thank
it's
you.
true. Yeah.
Good, thanks for that.
Yeah.
It's a good testimony.
I wonder if you could comment on peanuts.
So that's a good question, because this kind of fits the whole profile of what we're talking here with wheat, corn, dairy, sugars, corn. We want to make the best choices. When it comes to peanuts, compromised system. If you have a compromised system, if you have skin conditions, you're getting food reactions and food allergies, you could very well have a problem with peanuts. Peanuts are very high in a fungus called aflatoxin. Doesn't mean it's a problem for everybody. But you ideally want to get organic. You want to get a good quality peanut. And you just want to make sure you don't have an issue or a reaction to it. I mean, a lot of kids eat peanut butter. If they don't have a compromised system, they're not going to have a problem with that peanut butter. If they do have a compromised system, don't force it. Don't force the peanut butter on them. I wanted to make this point in class, so I just thought of it, so I'm glad you said that. But we get a lot of food intolerances. People are gluten intolerant. People are lactose intolerant. And what people do is they'll go to a health food store and they'll buy an enzyme so that they can consume that food. That's not how you do it. You have to avoid that food and take the enzyme to clean up the residues in your body that are causing problem and heal the gut. So I just wanted to stress that point. But like people who have anaphylactic shock reactions to peanuts, obviously got to stay away from peanuts. But it's only if you have a problem with it. So I think that's the important point here with all of these.
Two things. First, my grandfather worked as a farmer up in Minnesota. My uncle inherited the farm, And recently we were asking them about GMOs because basically before they take the cows to market, they feed them corn for a little bit to get them buffed up. And so we were asking about how GMOs were working, and it used to be that they crack the corn kernels right before they feed them to help the cow digest it. They noticed when they were using the GMOs that it was not working, so they would grind the corn up, and right now my uncle is thinking about stopping it because they're noticing absolutely no difference, things just passing straight through the cow. Second thing is a question. I've noticed in high school how many of my peers have claimed to either had OCD or currently have OCD. Do you have any thoughts on what might be causing that?
It's hard to know for sure, but I look at diet first with everything. I mean, regardless of what somebody's dealing with, you start with nutrition. And any type of, if you want to call it a behavioral disorder, I mean, any type of disorder like that, you want to look at what you're eating, and the number one thing is going to be the sugar. Just because sugar so much affects brain function.
I heard kombucha is good, but I also heard that there's a lot of sugar goes in to make kombucha. What are your thoughts on that?
Right, these are great questions. So the kombucha, another one where I'm a huge fan of fermented foods. In a healthy person, a person with no major health issues or a compromised gut, kombucha is going to be fantastic. Okay, but people who have infections, infectious issues, kombucha is actually a wild fermentation. It's the same way they ferment wine and beer. So the kombucha can be a problem for some people with compromised health. So you have to see if it works for you, because some people will not do well with kombucha, and they'll know it. So sometimes you just kind of have to know what's going on with your own body. But in general, kombucha is a fantastic, very healthy fermented drink, but not in a person with severe compromised system.
Can I follow up on that? So what would happen if you had a compromised system and you had kombucha? What are side effects? Do you know any of them?
You'd have almost like an allergic reaction to it. I mean, digestive issues. It'd cause a lot of bloating because it would actually feed the infection.
Got it.
What is Lakanto? How do you say that? And where do you find it?
I don't know a lot about Lakanto. I know that it's a sweetener that's a plant that has no glycemic index and will not raise blood sugars. You can buy it online. I think it's from Japan. It's somewhere from Asia, but I think it might be Japan. It's very, very expensive.
Okay, second question is, I grew up on a farm. We did a lot of canning, especially like, the fruits and vegetables. The way we canned our fruits is we added sugar to them to help the preserving process. Can you use stevia, or good grief, if the Lakanto's that expensive, you could hardly use it, but can you use something in place of sugar in processing your own foods?
I don't know. I'm not an expert in that area. I doubt you could use stevia, but I'm sure you could find a better source. But I don't know. You might just search the internet on that one.
Okay.
Honey? Is that what somebody said?
Are eggs good for you if they're cage-free? And is it just the yolk or the white as well?
Wow, another great question.
And can you eat them raw?
This is just
I've seen it. That's a good question.
This is just my personal opinion.
Rocky.
My personal opinion. A lot of people are going to disagree with this, but my personal opinion is eggs is one of the healthiest foods on the planet. That's just my personal opinion. I didn't do that to get a cheer. I really believe that. And I think the best way, hands down the best way to eat eggs is raw. It's true. Seriously. You get healthy. People are worried about salmonella. You know where salmonella comes from? A disease-sick chicken. You're never going to get salmonella if you eat eggs from a healthy chicken. And if you follow a program, like a rebuilding program for somebody who's really weak, or they're malnourished, or they're having a degenerative type of issue, like the GAPS diet, for example, she actually recommends people consuming from 6 to 8 raw eggs a day, because it's so packed with nutrition and it's such a healthy building food. And the other part of your question, to answer the other part of your question, what was the other part of your question?
Whether the yolk.
The yolk or the white, yes, thank you. I lost it. The whole egg. Now the nutrition's in the yolk. If you think about it, the white is the membrane trying to protect the yolk, because that's where all the nutrition is. So I think the yolk is the healthiest part, but I think we should not have to ever worry about consuming the whole egg if it's a healthy egg from a healthy chicken.
Cage-free doesn't matter, it's free range.
Thank you. Yeah, cage-free is tricky because that just means they like open the cage door and they don't actually ever go outside and see sunshine, but the cage door is technically open, so they're cage-free. That's one of those little marketing ploys, right?
What do you think about chlorine, like swimming in a chlorine pool, and also I had another one. I'll think of it if you want to answer that one.
Okay, well, chlorine is a very toxic chemical. We know that. And in high amounts, a lot of swimmers have major problems from the chlorine. A lot of people are switching to salt water. So you can get a saltwater pool, saltwater hot tubs. I mean, you can find those today. I think it might be kind of expensive, but switching over to saltwater is huge. Now, at your local gym, you're probably not going to talk them into doing that. But I think there are a couple of places that are doing that. So you just want to limit your exposure.
And also carrying a cell phone around. What do you think about that?
Oh, and one more note on chlorine is we're bathing in chlorinated water. So a good investment is a $40 shower filter that just takes out the chlorine, because especially a hot shower, you're absorbing all that chlorine into your system. Here's a quick story on chlorine. This is just really interesting. When I did some of my training, I did some training down in Clearwater, Florida with the Ulan Nutritional Systems. And it's a type of applied kinesiology. And I went down there, and I was in a hotel for 2 days, and they did a test on me, and what I tested for was chlorine in my body. And I asked him about it, because I have a shower filter at home. He goes, well, you're down here in Florida, you're staying in a hotel, and they use a heavier dosage of chlorine and a more dangerous type of chlorine in Florida because it smells funny, and they don't want the smell to affect the tourists or to drive the tourists away. So they have to use a more concentrated, I don't know what it is, but it's a different form of chlorine. And it showed up in a test for me being there for 2 days. So that's how chlorine can get in your system that quick. And then the other thing you asked about the cell phone, ever since I heard the study or read the study that carrying a cell phone in your pocket in men decreased testosterone levels and sperm counts, I no longer ever carry a cell phone in my pocket. My cell phone's right there. It's not in my pocket. So I encourage all people to keep their cell phone. It's hard to live without a cell phone, but keep it as far away from you as possible. When I'm driving, I usually have it on the floor of my car. And when I'm in my office, I have it at the other end of my office. And keep it away from your children. Keep it away from your babies on a baby stroller. You have to understand that satellite is pinging that cell phone every minute. And if you're holding the phone up here, or if it's down by your baby's head, you're the conductor for that electromagnetic energy. And if you guys probably don't know this, it's really interesting. Can't obviously prove it, but the guy who does the Verizon wireless commercials, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? He got an inoperable brain tumor. And he actually said in an interview, kind of jokingly, I mean, it's obviously very sad, but he said, I'm going to start using my cell phone in my other ear so that I have brain tumor balance. So they know that cell phones, they actually are calling cell phones, and some of this kind of stuff sounds extreme, but there are people calling cell phones the next cigarette, where all the research and information is completely covered up. They're going to say it's totally safe. And then in 10 years, when we have epidemics of brain cancer throughout our entire society, the truth is going to come out. So be careful with your cell phone usage.
I'm right here. I'm curious about local honey versus raw honey, because like back home I have a bee farm that I go to, and they give me some honey, but I guess obviously they heat it because it doesn't look like when I go to the store and it's raw and it's like white. So I'm curious how bad is the local honey that I guess they heat compared to raw?
You really, really want the raw honey. The more you heat it, the higher the glycemic index goes, so the more unsafe it's going to be for diabetics, the higher sugar content it's going to have. They treat bees, unfortunately, just like they treat cows and every other product of industry. They feed the bees sugar. They'll even feed them high fructose corn syrup so they produce faster. They'll spray them with gas. It's really crazy. There are local bee farmers around here. I just encourage you to know the source. know your source. Know the person you're getting the honey from. Make sure they don't treat the bees. They don't feed them extra honey. A good beekeeper will save the honey and cover the hive in the winter with honey so that the bees can make it through the winter without having to be fed sugar or gassed or anything like that. So just know your source. But raw local honey is one of the healthiest foods on the planet. Manuka honey that comes from New Zealand, I'm a huge fan of. They use it in hospitals. It'll heal a wound literally overnight. I had a gal come into the store. She had a dog who had had a tumor removed, and the wound wouldn't heal. It was just a gross, seeping wound, and they did antibiotics, and they did all kinds of things. She went to a holistic vet. There's a holistic vet in Lenexa, I think. And they said, oh, just try putting some Manuka honey on it. They put the Manuka honey on it. The wound literally healed overnight. It's amazing for healing wounds. Honey is.
Okay, to add to your sugar can contribute towards behavioral problems in children. My work with Exodus Cry, working with trafficked women, interviewing them and talking with them, the number one issue besides the fact that they didn't bond as children or babies with their parents is what they ate. One of the things that they all had in common was high sugar diets as well as high processed foods because it set them up for addictions to drugs.
Wow.
And that addiction to drugs led them, many of them, the ones that weren't like kidnapped, led them into trafficking, led them into the clubs and the brothels. And so I'm talking right now with someone who's being restored, and she is now seeing a naturopath down in Texas, and the naturopath said that exact same thing, that sugar addiction led to the drug addiction, and then when she got off the drugs, got out of the trafficking, she went right back to the sugar addiction. And
Wow.
now her adrenals are shut down, and she has a host of problems.
Well, thank you for sharing. Wow,
And
that's,
then one question,
important.
gluten-free oats, is that all organic oat groats, steel-cut oats, or what are gluten-free oats?
it has to say gluten-free oats. I don't know how they've grown it in a way that it doesn't have gluten. I don't know if it's a hybridization process or what, but it has to say gluten-free oats. Just because it's organic groats doesn't mean it's gluten-free.
And where do you get those?
I don't know. Online? I honestly don't know. Let's do 3 more.
Infant formula. Is almost all of that soy, so that's just awful, and so then what do you suggest instead? Obviously breastfeeding is the best, but when that's not happening, what do you recommend? And then for kids as they grow up, what do you recommend instead of the classic drink your milk with every meal?
So the infant formulas are either mostly one or two things as far as I know, soy or just sugar. And Islanders, for example, after they were done breastfeeding, they do coconut milk. Coconut milk is a fantastic option. Why? What is the fat in coconut milk? Saturated fat. What's the fat in breast milk? Saturated fat. Why? That's what builds the nervous system, builds the brain. That's what builds the child. So saturated fat, very important. So coconut milk, you can do almond milk, but I think coconut milk would be the best option. But they don't even necessarily need milk. I mean, if they breastfed for 2 years and they switch to solid foods, they don't have to continue to drink milk. And I don't think any child has to continue to drink milk for their whole lives. And there's plenty of people who have grown up without drinking milk, and they didn't have that available to them. Raw goat's milk or coconut milk would be my suggestion.
What do you know about Chateau milk? It's apparently local. So.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about it. I don't know the farm. I can't comment on it. Everyone who told me it's a really good company and they take really good care of the animals and it's a much healthier choice. The only comment I would make is that if it's bought in a grocery store, it has to be by law pasteurized. I don't know if it's homogenized. I'm guessing they don't use antibiotics or hormones from everything I've heard. I would say, and again, I don't know a lot about this, but I would say from what I've heard other people talk about, if you're going to buy milk in the grocery store, it's going to be your best choice.
Okay, and one more question. I've been hearing a lot about coconut oil. Do you know anything about it?
Oh my gosh, we could do an hour class on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, coconut oil is awesome. Like, where do you start? Like, it's one of the healthiest fats you can put in your body. It's a hormone precursor, so it helps you build all your sex hormones. It's the best oil for the thyroid gland. It heals the thyroid gland. It's a stable source of energy. It'll never, ever store as fat in your body. It goes straight to the liver and it's used as a fuel source. So a lot of athletes and a lot of marathon runners use it. It decreases cravings for sugars, sweets, and starches. It increases your metabolism, so it's going to help with weight loss. It's amazing for the skin, amazing for the hair. It's a wound healer. It's a natural sunscreen. If you have a burn, it'll heal your burn. Can I stop? Coconut oil is one of my favorite things on the planet. Yeah.
It's legit.
Last question.
You were saying that you didn't like Advil and that kind of stuff, like that's bad. What would you use instead if you wanted to take something?
Well, ideally, if it's just a one thing once in a while, I think people abuse it. You know, I think there's a time and a place for certain medications. You know, if you get a headache once a month and it's debilitating and an Advil knocks it out, okay. But if you have reoccurring headaches, let's find out why you have reoccurring headaches and make them go away forever and not rely on aspirin. I think that's the issue. But if you look where aspirin came from, it came from white willow bark, and you can actually buy herbal formulas that contain white willow bark and other herbs that do work as well. Just nothing's going to be have that dramatic effect that a drug does, because it actually overrides your nervous system. That's how drugs work. They don't work with your body, they actually override your system. So that's why they knock out pain so fast. So there's a time and a place for that, again. That's it. Thanks, guys.